Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special podcast episode today. We are co-hosting with The Room, a wonderful female-hosted podcast with both Claudia and Madison, focusing on the investor entrepreneurial world of San Francisco and other major cities. And they're both amazing women. So I'll pass it off to them to kind of give a little background and more information on The Room.
This is so fun to be here. So thanks for having us in the room for Womansplain. Really fun to be a little bit on the other side of the mic.
Yes.
And, just really a pleasure because I feel like there are not enough women in the podcasting space anyway to begin with. So doing a lot there for you guys. Love seeing it. But briefly, I'd love to introduce Claudia because she's my best friend and obviously business partner. She's a kick-butt founder of Prive, which is a platform that enables CPG brands to do subscription management for all of their, like, whether it be seltzer water to diapers, like truly everything.
Awesome.
And she founded that with one of her good friends at Uber, and they became like APMs together. That's actually how we met, was being product managers. We can talk about that more in a second. But just like watching her founder journey has been so inspirational, and I've learned a lot from her, and actually was lucky enough to get to be the first person to say yes to investing in her too, which is really quite fun.
That's amazing.
We have a multi-layered relationship. And to introduce Madison, though you really need no introduction, Madison, we've known each other when we started our PM careers, so we can get more into that. But she was a partner at Defy, which is an early stage venture fund in the Bay Area, and of course was one of our very first investors. And so Madison has really been there for a lot of founders from their very, very early journey to, raising Series A's, B's, exit, so on and so forth. So she's your woman if you have questions about venture capital. And then you've been at HBS for the past year, really kind of taking time to try something a little bit different, which has been incredible.
Well, awesome. We're so excited to have you guys. We love seeing women in tech and venture, of course, and two best friends who are starting this, who really made the side hustle a big podcast. So tell us a little bit about The Room. How did you get started? And what are your plans for it right now?
So going back to 2020, we're all stuck at home, and there was this moment where Claudia and I had been always talking about doing something together. We'd had a conference idea in 2019 that really didn't come to fruition. We're just always back and forth, and there was just one week in July that she actually literally almost to the week in 2020 where she texted me and was like, I think we should start a podcast. And it just felt like the right time to do it because in COVID, it was so hard to meet new people.
Yeah.
And she was becoming a founder. I was becoming a funder. And we wanted a really great way to have like a legitimate reason to talk to interesting people. And then we also did feel like there was this gap in the market for telling female led conversations that had a differentiated story lens. So interviewing it from that point of view of being a beginner and actually being like, we don't know how to go to market. How do you go to market? And authentically asking those questions. So today we've launched over 10 seasons.
Wow.
And it's been quite a ride. Have had some fun wins along the way, like the Forbes media list for 30 under 30. But honestly, the pleasure of it all has been building it with you. I feel like that's really
truly
the secret sauce.
I think we would have not, I certainly would have not made it to 10 seasons without you. And I think it's become more than just a podcast. And I really think that's because we've had such an aligned vision for what we want to do with this, but also just having that friendship as a foundation has been a big thing. And I think our dynamic as friends, but also investor founder has been really interesting because building a startup really just a few months after starting the podcast, I was able to ask these incredible guest questions that were burning on my desk during my day job. And I think probably the same thing for you as you were looking at different spaces and evaluating companies. So it was cool to be able to have that synergy.
That's so awesome. Well, it's so inspiring for us because we are also best friends.
Yes.
And we also texted each other, I think, January over Christmas. We should start something, it being Womansplain. So you mentioned a little bit about all the other initiatives within The Room other than the podcast show. So what's in the works right now?
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, you're talking to us at a very interesting time because we are 2 days away from our largest event we've ever hosted. It's called Inside Summit, really with the thesis of let's bring together founders, investors, operators in the room for like an unconference where people can actually build meaningful connections. We're going to have some live podcast recordings. So, people can actually be in the room where it happens and listen to incredible investors, incredible founders, thought leaders in different spaces, but also doing it in a way that is really fun with great food and cool brands showcasing their products and an awesome after party. So I think that's been really the culmination of us doing a lot of in-person events over the past couple of years.
We've done over 20 events as a bit of a go-to-market strategy for the pod itself, but then also to help us in our careers. And I think kind of like the side hustle nature of doing a podcast means it does need to be serving other parts of what you're building and who you're trying to become. And so for Claudia and me, that was oftentimes investors for her company, and then potential founders for me. And so that's been some of that organic go-to-market growth that we've had through building and scaling over 4 years. And just on the point about the conference, I think I'm curious to hear your guys' take, but I feel like conferences today are so staid and don't have an energy that makes you excited to spend a full day with all these people. So I'm kind of calling it like not your dad's technology conference, because like you just, there's different expectations of our generation of what a curated event feels like. So I went to an event recently and I'm sorry, they only had like drip coffee. I was like, I need a barista bar. Like
matcha.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm paying for this ticket, there better be a matcha.
Exactly.
So we'll have a barista bar, like things like that just I think our generation frankly expects. It's a little silly, but I think it can really elevate the experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I've been to so many conferences in my life, coming from like a growth venture capital background where honestly, I didn't even attend a single event. I just went there and I had 50 meetings. I went home.
Right.
Literally. Like that's exactly, and that was the entire point of it. And I sat in a conference room alone and met with 50 people for 20 minutes and it was effective. I mean, like it is. You go home and you're like, okay, like here's my entire email, potential investors. But did I meet anyone new that I really had formed a connection with? Did I feel like I learned anything really? No. Did I take advantage of the like extraordinarily expensive speakers that were sitting around? But a lot of those like can feel really inauthentic too. Like how many panels have I sat in where every single person says the same thing, and they're like, totally. Okay, like what do you think? And they're like, the next thing is going to be disruptive. And they all say the same thing 12 times. And then the panel ends, right? And no one asks a question. So how are you really trying to kind of change that? Because I feel like it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, I think we've really felt the power of like friendship and just like authentic connections and like getting things done from a career perspective. Like so many people that you've introduced me to like have become customers or investors. And I feel like having that foundation of just like a personal connection is so important. And so I think like first things first, it can't be 500 people in like an auditorium where there's really no moment for connecting on a human level. And so I think we've really designed everything around like grab a matcha with someone, like actually have like the time and space to build maybe a friendship. A lot of the questions that we're asking in panels are not the questions that everyone asks. We're trying to ask some more hard-hitting questions to get some truths, and really cultivating a space where people can be authentic and honest around their takes. And then, like also having benefits for founders like free headshots or, access to people that might be customers or investors and like helping facilitate those introductions. I think it's just like small details that really change the vibe from being the super corporate thing to really just like a day of connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, I love that. I think that's honestly so special about being female-led too, because I think that is like a really different touch in the industry, and it's a really completely different approach. Because I think there are so many like barriers, to that sort of natural connection that I think like maybe like more male-led like already have. Or honestly, I also think women just have like a different touch when it comes to event planning, and it can feel like completely different. I think it can feel a lot more comfortable and honestly a lot more casual, like less corporate. And I think that's something we're all searching for, especially in kind of post-pandemic world. Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome. So besides this huge initiative, what do you think is something else you've done that you've been really excited about, or huge learning you've had from kind of the podcast?
I was reflecting on this. I think two things. One, we chose to do interview style, which for us was a product of wanting to get in front of really interesting and dynamic people. And I think I am uncomfortable asking for favors and asking for intros. And it's been an incredible way of like pushing myself and yourself beyond like what is comfort. So like we've gotten to have some really incredible guests and founders on. So like Michelle Zatlin of Cloudflare, Spencer Raskoff of Zillow, Sridhar Ramaswamy, the current CEO of Snowflake. And all of those introductions were because I put like myself out there, or Claudia put herself out there, and we said, do you mind, like, I see you're connected to this person, or do you happen to know this? And like, it's just a great thought exercise, because the worst that can happen is no. So whether it be in your career, whether it be in your podcasting vision, I think that's been like one key component. And then the second, I would say, has really just been about consistency and having someone you trust in the room with you to push you on that consistency. I think it's actually unbelievable that it's been 4 years since we started this. And it's really been because we've put one foot in front of the other and just published the episodes. But I think I speak for both of us when I say we would have stopped a while ago if it was a solo journey. So I'm pro co-foundership on these things.
For sure. There's been so many moments where like, I'm down in the dumps and you're pulling me out, and vice versa. And I think that's just so like true to life. And so I think it's been cool that we've been able to work through the friendship, but also true co-founder dynamic, and like the sum is greater than the parts.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like it's been really great just hearing about your journey as friends, but also, co-hosts, and something that we were also just kind of trying to work through now and figure out along the way. And it's been great so far. But have there been any challenges throughout your journey in terms of kind of scaling the podcast? I know you guys been doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Has your vision changed throughout the years? And I guess what are some key learnings and challenges that you had?
I think like one challenge that we probably both felt the entire time was the podcast was not our full-time job. Like you had an incredibly intense venture career. I was starting a startup, right? And so there were moments where it was really hard to prioritize the podcast and make sure that we weren't just going through the motions. And so I think it was really like both a science and an art to make sure that we were sticking true to our vision of what this podcast meant to us and what we wanted to offer the world. And that just because things didn't get busy didn't mean we would compromise on the quality of the guests or the quality of, how consistently we were doing our seasons. And so I think just like the commitment was kind of key there. I would also say like you have to leverage yourself. And I think this is something I didn't learn until probably year one after starting my startup, where it's like our unique superpowers is not in editing the episode. It's not in maybe some other different components. Maybe it's not even in like social growth. So how do we surround ourselves with incredible people that really help us get to that next level? We had someone, Michelle, like who was incredible at really galvanizing our in-person community related to the podcast. And so I think we've had some like hits and misses in terms of like people that we've worked with. But like when you do find that right person, the leverage is so important in that scale journey.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it, because I think it is so hard when you're starting something, like anything, when you enter a brand new industry, there are so many aspects you have no idea about, and you enter it and you realize just the million details that are involved in anything, in anything
crazy.
New, and you're just like, oh my God. And like any industry, once you become an expert, you're like, whatever, you speak the language, but it takes a long time. And so I think reminding yourself that you don't actually have to be an expert at every single part. And I think as women, that's honestly a really hard thing for us. I think like accepting that like you can do something and be bad at some parts of it. And I'm saying like that's why you like leverage your network and you like leverage the people you're around. And that's a really important thing to remember, especially when you're young and you're trying to start something.
Yeah. Also, like getting over the embarrassment factor, like putting yourself out there is vulnerable.
For sure.
And now, like people say, especially because I entered a new environment by going back to school and going to business school, people kind of now literally have been like, oh, you're the podcast girl. And I'm like, okay, cool. I hope I'm not only the podcast girl, but also like kind of now I am the podcast girl and I can own it. But like when we first started, I was like, oh my God, like don't talk to me. Like this is like, I like am putting myself out there. So that like content creator hump and like social pressure.
Totally.
I don't know, that I think was like a self-conscious thing I had to get over.
Yeah.
And now we're just rolling with it.
Yeah.
Second nature.
Yeah.
No, that's so important to think about, especially as women. Like, I'm also the same way, and you just have to get over that and be like, yeah, this is what I am. I'm like 10,000 other things, but this is what I do and I do it well. And like as women, we really have to like always think about that, which I think is really hard.
Well, and this is why we bonded. Like Sola and I bonded on a girls' trip in Miami, and it wasn't as crazy as it sounds, I promise. But it was like that one of those things where I was like, oh, you have a side hustle. Wait, you have 2 side hustles. Wait, you also have a full-time job. Like we're the same person, because like we always joke like we're queen of the side hustles. People are like, how do you do it? You're like, I don't know, but I get bored.
I'm like, I just don't sleep.
It's fine.
Whatever. Sleep is for the week anyway. But no, I think it's really important to also talk about like network, as you said, leveraging your network. So I'd love to like shift our gears and talk a little bit about mentorship, because I know that's something that we always think about, we chatted about before this. So what does mentorship mean for you guys? And how has that kind of helped you throughout your career?
I think mentorship is just so important, and I think people have such a cookie cutter view of what mentorship is, and thus they have a hard time finding it, because they're like, how do I ask for mentorship? And mentorship can come in so many different flavors, right? Like I was recently getting coffee with one of my closest friends who's a few years younger than me. She's just starting a company, and she was like, you've been such a great mentor to me. And I'm like, I didn't even know I was a mentor, you know, but like that just stemmed from a friendship of her asking advice, you know? And then, you know, I also meet with like my former boss at Uber who, you know, also just like gives incredible advice and like really helped with my career. And that's maybe more of like a formal like mentorship relationship. But I think people really need to step away from what they think a mentor is and like how to ask for one, and really just start following up on conversations where you felt like there was a connection, like people that you really respect or admire different parts of their life. Like it doesn't matter if they're older than you, more senior, less senior, just keep kind of pulling on that thread if you feel like there's something intriguing around that person you met or had a great conversation with. And really building that organic relationship is so important. Like, I don't think the most effective way in cultivating mentorship is just like cold emailing someone being like, hey, can you be my mentor? Like, let's meet once a quarter, because you end up in this cycle where even if that person says yes, you're just asking questions for the sake of asking questions because you feel like you're in this mentorship dynamic. And mentorship is just like so much more varied than that.
Yeah. Like, I think mentorship is built in the trenches, and like it usually doesn't happen because you cold email someone on LinkedIn and like start to get to know them.
Yeah.
Because most of my mentor relationships have been earned. Like, people who have a lot of wisdom to give also don't have a lot of time usually. And so I think that honestly, a little bit like our university experiences did us dirty, because you kind of get told, like, especially as a woman, like, find mentors. And it comes across as this thing that you can just like pick up like a collectible, but actually like deep and like lasting quote unquote mentorship and partnership comes because there's mutual respect on both sides. And I think I didn't fully understand that when I was 20, definitely not at 22, and like only maybe even a fraction today. But now that I think we're all kind of starting to be a little bit on that curve of like wisdom and growth, where you see how busy you truly become, and none of us have kids, so like it's not even that crazy yet. And like the people who still invest the time in you mean that it's really at a sacrifice to something else. And I didn't even conceptualize that at 22. And that like mindset shift now that I'm a little bit older is like, okay, like this person is committed and they have given me so much, like I want to give back in return. So maybe like the TLDR of that little rant is like mentorship actually becomes a two-way street. And like that's when mentorship becomes like really juicy and good, is when both parties feel like they're learning from each other. And that could be up, down, age, or lateral.
Totally.
But it's that two-way street moment that's like that's the click.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think like mentorship, honestly, you have seasons in your life where you need it and don't. And I think that's completely fine. And I think there are points where you're like seeking it, and as a result it will be found, but like maybe not actively, but like you'll be in points of your life and you feel like you're at a career pivot, you're questioning your choices, you don't know what you want to do next. And like as a result, it will effectively be found, even if it's not necessarily in this formal structured way. And then there's moments in your life where you're honestly settled. right? Like, for sure,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm feeling pretty good where I am. Like, I like my career, I like my job, etc. I don't feel like I'm in this like moment of change or strife. And I think in those moments you become others' mentors as well, because like those who are seeking you are seeking your stability or seeming as if you are. And like the older you get, like there's just these seasons of ups and downs, like effectively, where like there's seasons of like stability and seasons of not. Like it's literally like chaos and not. That's like honestly what I felt. And I feel like you end up like kind of pushing and pulling these relationships.
So like our audience is a little bit younger, and I'm guessing your guys' is too, or just like earlier in the career base.
Totally. Yeah.
So can we just talk about like what makes a good mentee?
Oh yeah.
Because
I love that.
I really struggle with this when I get awesome now, like younger women who are 7 years our junior, who like come and ask for help, but then honestly sometimes they're quite underprepared.
Totally.
Which is fine. We're all busy.
Yeah.
But I'm curious from your guys' POV, like, what do you think makes a good mentee?
I mean, I think what's very odd, this is something I struggled with, is like when you're young, you do feel like you really need help, but you're also really embarrassed about it. And so it's like this odd dynamic of like being really defensive and like not, like you just feel like you have to like defend like I felt like I had to be like defensive and like, you know, have like some sort of face style, like had it all together, but like everyone knew I was like 24 and didn't fucking know shit. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like literally, I think it's like actually letting yourself like just admit that you don't know what you're doing, because the answer is the other person didn't know what they were doing either at that age, and like not being defensive about it and being like more open. I think you can be open and be like, hello, I know I need help, but I actually don't know questions to ask. That would be a way better thing than like trying to fake something, you know, which like I've certainly done that. Like when you feel like, I honestly know I need help, I have no idea how to even get it. The only thing I can think of is trying to ask someone who I admire, but I don't even know what the heck to ask. But if like you're more open about that, I think it would probably like engender the person to you more.
Yeah. And I would say maybe like finding the balance of like being super engaged and not at all. So like I feel like what I found with kind of the younger generation is either they don't really follow up because they are doing whatever whatever
Gen
Gen
Z
Z
do. Whatever Gen Z does.
Or they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like I always like joke like we had so much grit like millennial, you know, and now maybe that's just gone with like the online presence, social media. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some studies on that, but like in terms of being engaged and like just having that grit, following up. But also you don't want to do too much of that, right? Like we mentioned, like we're all busy people. You don't want to, I guess, abuse that kind of relationship. So finding that balance of being engaged, following up, but not overbearingly so, I think is probably a good thing.
Go ahead.
The follow-up piece is so real. We actually like recorded like a whole side chat of our podcast around like how to ask good questions and follow up appropriately, because it's actually wild how lacking that is. But I wanted to touch on some of the things that you said, because it is so painfully obvious when people are just asking questions because they think you want to be asked those questions, not because they actually need those answers or that it would even help them. And like Gen Z, like it's better for you to be like, hey, I just wanted to spend time with you and I don't know what to ask. But like here I am and like these are my goals. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
But that's also a cry for help. Like literally if you like want to spend time with someone just because whatever, but you don't know why, like like ask yourself why. Like for your sake and for ours or your hypothetical mentor. Because I think that's the thing that really kind of gets my goat. Like I love spending time with people. Like I know you have something to teach me. And I might have something to teach you, but I actually don't know what the thing is that I can teach you. Like if you don't tell me what you're looking for, I can tell you a lot of things. I have a lot of thoughts and I don't know which direction to go. So let's partner together to make this time valuable, because when you show up to a conversation, whether it's 15, 30 or an hour, like I'm sorry, you better have like the 3 things you want out of the conversation. For us and for you, there's hundreds of hours of content on the internet about like our perspective on things. So it's really easy to learn like what I care about. It might not be what you care about though. So if you have like a thought about what you want to do with your career, come with that thesis and be like, this is my thesis based on the way you made your own life decisions. Could you help me think through this? Or what have it be? If you don't even know the questions to ask, like there's a way to get started. And now you just heard my tirade on like coming prepared to a mentorship. But then the follow-up is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listeners, don't email Madison unless you know why. No, I'm kidding.
I want
a thesis.
I think the thing is, like, I want to help so bad. Like, I know, I mean, our whole genesis is being door openers, right?
totally.
And so many incredible people have opened doors for me. So it's just like, I want to help you help me help you.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Totally.
You can't, like, you could easily make a zillion intros or like come up with frameworks, but like you need to know what they're looking for, you know?
Okay, also on this point, and I'm curious what you guys think, like, I actually have gotten a little bit more, like, intentional with my intros because it does reflect on the introer if you make a bad intro.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I don't think everyone deserves an intro.
Everyone deserves an intro, but you got to prove, especially if you don't know the person.
Yeah.
I think, right? Like,
Yeah, like I think like when you have a conversation with them, like if it's an intro, right? Where I feel like 90% of my best intros have been one intro to another, and then that one's been awesome, right?
Yeah.
But like every single one should be like a mini little interview. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's also not even necessary. It's not like they like deserve it. Like generally, it's like, is this the right fit for them even? And like I feel like this conversation is supposed to be like them and us figuring out like what's sort of the right fit for you.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, no, like if you're like this person and this person are not going to get along, it's not going to be helpful. Like,
Totally.
Of course. Why are you wasting either their time?
I had this happen one time where like I met this one person who I didn't know very well, but it was like a trusted person introduced us. He spent 30 minutes with me. He said, I think this is the person you need to speak to based on the things you've asked me or you've told me. And then I actually got a job offer out of that introduction.
Yeah. That's
I credit the person who didn't know me, but took 30 minutes to listen to my story.
Totally.
I was pretty specific about what I was looking for. And then it yielded a really, really great intro. And that to me was like not even mentorship, but just great network.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's like how I've gotten pretty much everything
Really?
in my life. Yeah, I mean, the amount of just intro to intro to intro that I've had, yeah. I have multiple job offers,
Let's go, Brooke.
I mean, no, but it's true. It's like, honestly,
Pop
that's
off.
the only way. That's like the only way I've gotten things, you know, like seriously in my life. Like I can't literally like, I'm thinking like I mean, every sort of step of the way has been that. There has been like, and I believe that that's the only way you get stuff. You know what I'm saying? And there's always been a door to a door to a door to a door. And like every, you know, person I've talked to has been testing to a certain extent, but like that's their right. And like their network is their own like closed door. And I try to give it back to a certain way, but like I always tell people this, like generally, it's like literally it's the fifth intro down the line that's going to get you something. And just like keep looking for that. But I also like don't do it all the time. So I think that's also different too. I don't know your attitude, but my perspective is like, don't be like maybe you should be constantly networking. But I'm like, if you like are looking for something like a job, it's way easier to get help. Like you're like, I'm actively looking for a job. This is the job I want. People will help you. Is you have an attitude.
Right.
But if you're not just like, I'm generally trying to meet people, like I don't know. Maybe you should be like waiting a little bit, or unless you're looking for something really specific, or like you're seeking something really specific. I don't really know if you should be doing that right now or spending your time doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know your guys' attitude. Even though I feel like it's like always be networking, but
I feel like it's
necessarily
just around like equipping the person you're asking for the intro or favor with
Yeah.
like collateral where like it's just easy for everyone, you know? Like
yeah.
when people ask me like, oh, can you intro me to an investor or whatever? I'm like, great, like where's your blurb? Like why are you excited about this investor? Like give me more.
Yeah.
And the ones that and I'm not like passing value judgment on like how great your startup idea is or whatever, but it's always the ones that are like, here's what I'm looking for. This is why we're gonna win. Like here's a pitch like here's whatever. Please send this forwardable email. So I just need to click one button. Like those are the ones where I'm like, you know what? Like you put in the work, you thought through this. Like I'll gladly forward this, you know? But the ones that are vague and just they don't equip you with like the easy click.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. And I think it's just there's moments where you're really wanting something. There's moments that you're not.
Yeah, it's okay to not
You know,
want
and it's
an intro.
okay to be like at a point where you're like, you're not really looking to meet everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you shouldn't feel like this like constant overlooming pressure, which I feel like there is like this weird advice. So it's like always meet people, like always actively network, and I'm like, I don't know, like if that's really true. Like you can absolutely always passively network. You can always attend events. You can always like try to meet people. You can always add people to like whoever you've met and like use like their bits of advice for like in the future. But it's like the answer is like you have only so many favors in the world you can possibly use. Like maybe you should save it for when you really need it.
Yeah.
You know, and people are way more likely to help you when they feel like you have like a real thing you need.
Yeah, that's like kind of my philosophy is like if I want to ask someone a favor and I really don't like doing that, I will come prepared and I will give you 3 reasons why, and like I'll only ask if it's something that I really, really want. And I think for me, like of course that also comes into in terms of like being like perfectionist and being a woman and like not wanting to like ask for favors, etc.
Right.
And that's also something that I'm trying to like do less of in terms of if there's something that I want and like I'm prepared for it, I should go for it versus like waiting and then making sure that we're like perfectly prepared.
Yeah.
But that's how I have kind of approached things, and something that I'm also kind of thinking about the pros and cons of the approach. I mean, there's really no right answer. It's worked sometimes and it hasn't, but
also to bring gender into it too, I think I've been grateful to have had both like male and female mentors, and I think that that's always really important too, because sometimes like you do need to get feedback about how you're perceived by the opposite gender. And so having someone that you do trust, you don't think is going to give you bad advice because of a biased POV is actually pretty invaluable in the workplace. So I've gotten some really great feedback from male colleagues who can just see the playing field a bit different because of how they know and their perception of the world. So I guess just like adding that layer in too, because I usually feel more comfortable with women.
Yeah.
But I think that, multiple types of mentors is very valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And like being in our industries too, like tech and finance, like I would love many female mentors, but that's just not possible just because there's no one.
And I've actually heard that women are reached out to by men and women generally more for mentorship. That actually women, because they're more open, approachable, will actually mentor men as well, more than men will.
That's interesting.
So they're actually like a lot more open male mentors.
Yeah, I want the stats on that.
Like, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so.
GPT that later.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. I know you're at HBS currently.
Yes.
You're still a founder.
Grinding away.
Crushing it.
What is next for you two? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go back to venture? You're going to sell your company, become a billionaire, run the world. What's next for you guys?
Do you want to take that first?
Yeah, no. So I think my mother would love to know what's next post-business school. I'm in between my first and second year, and I'm doing an internship this summer at LVMH, which is Louis Vuitton's parent company.
So cool.
Yeah, it's been pretty epic. I came from a retail background. That was my first job out of college at Gap Inc. And so just getting to see that worldview of brands and retailers and how they think about frontier technology, which is the team that I get to be on, has been incredible. And I think as an investor, frankly, what I felt was my biggest weakness was having too little time in the operating world. And that's frankly why the podcast has been an incredible compliment, because we're operating a business. We pay taxes, and there are ups and downs like any founding journey that has allowed me to extrapolate those operational learnings for founders. So this summer was a bit of me taking a step back from the venture side of things and just trying my hand at operating again. I do think I love venture, so no promises, but if we were to come back on in a year, I think it wouldn't be crazy if I was back in venture. But also I think being in venture is a bit of a mindset. Like you can always be talking to founders, you can angel invest, and that can play a lot of different ways. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about going into my second year back in Boston. Not thrilled to be back in Boston, honestly, but that'll be okay.
Yeah, no, for me, I'm like 3 years into the founder journey, and now we're like a team of 12, which has been really exciting. I feel like there's been this like market shift between team of 6 and team of 12. Like it's become very different. And so what occupies a lot of my time is now like people managing, which and like more strategy stuff and like market expansion and like how do we move up market XYZ, as opposed to like, let's get this product out the door. Like, let's get our first customer. Let's do everything ourselves. So I'm just looking forward to the team continuing to grow and just starting to like dip my feet into some of those like new challenges as like a slightly later stage founder. Fundraising on the horizon, I don't know, but every day is different. And, you know, it feels like a decade I've been doing this, but it also feels like 2 seconds. And so I feel like it's hard to say where I will be in a year. but that keeps things exciting.
Wait, can we pass the mic back to you? It's so weird being on this side, like not asking the questions. Like, where are you guys thinking about? Like, yeah, what's even for Womansplain? Like, what's on the horizon for y'all there?
Yeah, I think, the sky's the limit for us. We've been at it for a little over 6 months.
Congrats.
Thank you. I always told Madison, I'm like, I can't believe you've been doing this for 4 years. That is crazy.
Nor can we.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of grit and consistency. So we'd love to, keep growing it similar to you guys, and build the kind of in-person community that we haven't really explored yet.
Yeah.
But definitely want to continue that, especially in this industry where there's so few women.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really started this because both of us, have felt really alone in the industry in a lot of ways and a lot of different times. And, we're both like really close friends. We're able to lean on each other, but generally would love to just be able to enhance that community. I feel like I have a real passion. We have a real passion for that. And we want to just make, other people. It's just it's a really, really hard industry to be in, like female or male. And it can be really competitive and tough. So would love to just kind of hopefully either make some people in there feel a little different or maybe change the industry as a whole. So
honestly, like as we wrap up, I think like we talked back and forth about mentorship, the founding journeys of both of our podcasts, even our careers besides the podcast. And I think seeing you guys do this together, and then I know the felt experience for me and Claudia, like it is so powerful to have what I think I'd call like a peer mentor.
Yeah, totally.
Like someone that you really can trust with the stupidest questions. Like,
oh yeah,
I was arguing with my sublease last night. And like I texted Claudia because I was like, I'm so upset right now. Like this person is being so unreasonable.
Yeah.
And like that's obviously the silliest things. And then we were at a sample sale earlier today. But we're also throwing our largest event ever on Wednesday. And so we have range, ladies and gentlemen.
And I hope to see that hot pink little bag there because I feel like I need to see
absolutely.
the Garlic Chicken show.
Absolutely.
So it's good.
And so like don't be afraid to acknowledge that someone who's your age, we're literally like born 15 days apart, and your like experience set has a lot to teach you. And if you actively partner on a journey like we've been able to, and like you guys are, like the growth together is just like, I'm like really getting emotional.
No, truly.
It really
Don't make me
is
cry,
so
Mads.
powerful. So just don't knock that like peer mentorship mentality too,
Yeah.
because your peers are in the trenches with you actually, and those are
Totally.
the people who in 30 years we're gonna be like chilling, hopefully somewhere lovely and not like New York in the summer on the heat wave.
By the beach.
Yes. Hopefully Saint Tropez.
Exactly.
Literally, yes. Oh, well, this has been so amazing. Thank you guys for coming on. Like, seriously, making the trek down to Brooklyn. And we are so excited for your event. And this was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really awesome. So thank you all for tuning in. And, please reach out to us, womansplainpod1@gmail.com. Also, check out the Room podcast.
Podcast.
Follow us on our socials. Thanks so much for listening.